my name's Shobha Podewal. I'm a GP and a health researcher at the Department of Primary Care and Population Health at UCL. I'm really excited to be here today to celebrate the culmination of a public engagement project called Diverse Voices, which was a project funded by the UCL East Community Engagement Seed Fund, aiming to explore the barriers to participating in health research for people from ethnic minority groups.
I'm Chandrika Kavraj. I am a carer for two elderly parents. They've got long-term conditions, and one of them is a stroke survivor, so she's disabled. And I wanted to be part of this project because I do get involved in health research quite a lot, and I'm interested in health research as long as it impacts the patients and makes things better for them. But I'm also interested in photography, and that's why I wanted to get involved.
My name's Koes Mia. I'm a photographer, and my role was really to help the participants in the project to think about photography as a way to visually tell stories.
The reason why we chose photography is because we wanted to make the project as accessible as possible. So one of the problems with health research and engaging with the public is that sometimes scientific reports, scientific papers don't get through to the right people, and people find it difficult to engage with. So I was really determined not to make this a written project and to make it as unscientific as possible.
I was into photography before the pandemic, but for some reason I kind of went into myself and I stopped using the cameras and stopped looking at things in terms of with a photographer's eye, if you like. So this allowed me the opportunity to re-engage with that and become more creative.
They had to be quite innovative in terms of what they photographed. Like I said, some of it was outdoors and nature, but a lot of it was kind of, close-up, abstract, hands, activities or items around the house that was important to them. Every picture was telling another facet of their personal story over lockdown, thinking about their health conditions.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Jassim. I'm a postdoctoral researcher in health and social care, and so for my normal day-to-day job, I evaluate complex evaluations. So I evaluate complex interventions in health and social care. So that's in the NHS and also outside the NHS as well. And then I guess the reason why I'm here today is last year I led a campaign with lots of other researchers and research development staff called the Lost Voices. And I can kind of tell you all more about that later.
Well, hi everyone. I'm Tina. I'm a final year medical student at UCL, just across the road there. I became interested in this kind of thing through doing global health for my bachelor's, and then I did medical anthropology for a year, which just made me think a bit more critically about medicine that I was learning in university. How I kind of got to know Shobha, not just in my fifth year, one of my fifth year modules, but was also through work that I got involved with decolonizing the medical curriculum, which was a group started not too long ago, in the aftermath of George Floyd's death, and the students wanted to come together and do something about it. And the way that we thought at the time would be a good way to use our kind of common interest would be to put together a resource where people could find more information about problems within medicine, problems within in our curriculum, not just our medical school, but other medical schools. And it became like an open resource where people could give suggestions. It could be videos, podcasts, anything. And from that, we became a more official group, doing discussions, running like a round table. And now we've got involved with actually helping change the curriculum itself. And I'm sure we'll talk about that later. Sorry, I'll just keep track if you don't stop me.
No, I can't wait to hear about it. I'm so excited to talk about both projects. So first of all, Sarah, can you tell us more about the Lost Voices campaign and how it got started, how you got involved?
Sure. So really, really similar to Tina. I got a grant from UCL Organisational Development for £1,000. So it wasn't a large amount of money, but we actually did struggle to spend it because of COVID, and all of our plans kind of changed. So I'll take you back a couple of years as also a second generation researcher. I had some struggles during my academic kind of career. So undergrad to master's to PhD, there were often like meetings that I felt that I didn't know kind of subtly what people were speaking about. People often not just mispronounce my name, but they just fail to recognize that Sarah is my name. And they always seem to call me Jasmine, even though that's neither my first name or my surname. And there's these kind of like subtle things that happen to you that just make you kind of realize that I am somehow different from my counterparts. So a couple of years ago, I went to a conference that was aimed at researchers from at the time, BME background. That was the terminology that was used. And I, for the first time in my entire kind of academic career, I went into a room with hundreds of other people who looked like me, sounded like me. And I was just kind of like a bit in awe. And I was like, where have all these people been my entire like PhD? And at the time, I think I was a postdoctoral researcher, probably like 1 or 2 years in. And I realized there was like quite a gap. And when I met other people just, at conferences or just through networking, everybody seemed to say the same thing, that if you had any sort of inequality, you struggled a bit more than other people. So I applied for this grant. I wanted to do something. I wasn't sure what it would be. COVID obviously changed everything. And so that morphed into the Lost Voices campaign. So myself and other researchers and research development staff, we're from this group called the London Postdocs. We set about firstly trying to identify the inequalities present in the academic sector. And sometimes they're present throughout all levels of the career ladder, but they seem to really, really impact early career researchers. So those who are a bit more junior. And often if you have an inequality and you're more junior, you may be scared to speak up in fear of career progression, just, losing face and credibility and a whole host of other things. So this program, this campaign had 4 stages to it. So the first stage, we just wanted to find out what the issues were. So I posted a video of myself online, kind of sharing my experiences. I invited others to do the same. My colleagues did the same. And we sort of got the conversation going through social media, the website. But it was really sad. People made comments and then deleted them. In fear of, being traced back to their research group. And it kind of really hit home that some of these things that we face, there is a real fear of speaking out. And that's why it's called the Lost Voices. So we took these stories and we tried to identify senior academics who were already quite successful in their career to ask, you faced this inequality. How did you deal with it? How did you overcome it in order to kind of reach career success? So that was really interesting. And then we went further up the career ladder and we spoke to kind of department heads and people who were quite pivotal in making a change. And we had a closed panel debate. That was largely due to COVID, but also so we could, kind of speak some truths and understand what the issues were. And then finally, we contacted the 5 most senior leaders at 5 London institutions who were in charge and responsible for equality, diversity and inclusion. And we presented our findings to them.
Amazing. This is such important work, isn't it? There's so much discussion at the moment about not just the gender gap, but the gaps and inequalities faced by people from ethnic minorities. We know that at professor level, Black people in particular are hugely underrepresented. And so I know there's lots of people trying to address that at the moment, but it's a complex issue, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So I think this project's really important, and that's why I wanted to talk to you today. But obviously, you've faced many challenges. I don't know if you want to talk more about what was particularly difficult about this project and how you overcame that.
Absolutely. So I think, as everyone can appreciate, COVID completely changed and steered the course of what we had hoped to do. But in some ways, I would say that actually made things better. It was so much easier to contact certain people whose diaries are normally very, very full. So in that sense, I see that as a bit of a positive. But in another sense, where you would normally interact with your peers and your colleagues and be able to go to other events and perhaps promote your work and the things that you're doing, it was just very difficult to get the word out there. It was very difficult for people to fill out yet another survey or another form. And as creative as we'd like to be, everybody had a lot going on during the pandemic, and especially in 2020 and 2021. So asking people who've already faced an inequality to do extra work, and that's often referred to as many things, but like an inequality tax, that in particular was very challenging. And so as much as we tried to kind of mitigate and work around it and say, you can give us anonymous survey submissions if you're scared of being found out, and you can send us a video if you do want to, speak publicly. Those kind of things I found quite challenging, that I think had it not been COVID may have been better, but it might just be inherent in this group of people that they are scared to speak out.
Yeah, it's a sensitive issue, isn't it? So I guess that's something to think about. And we face similar issues. I really hope to have held our workshops face to face, but I didn't get to meet a lot of these people until today. So I think COVID's been a big barrier for a lot of us. But thank you. I guess the other thing I'm interested in is you must have heard some really sad stories in some cases. Are there any that particularly hit home for you, or was there anything you particularly learned from doing the project that you'd like to share with us?
So as you would imagine, at all levels of the career ladder, even at the very, very top, you hear such sad stories, and some are, I'm very happy to share, and some people see it happening to others, and I think that's something I didn't expect. In that, if you're from a particular inequality background, or you have an intersectionality of many, you often feel like you're quite alone, and it's just happening to you, or it's happening to the group that you perhaps belong to. But I think what I didn't know is that it is visible to other people, but they don't necessarily always know how to help. And so our campaign, what it did do in a positive sense, was highlight some of the issues. And the word intersectionality is just really thrown around. I don't know if some people even know what it means, or they just think, oh, it's multiple issues. But I think what it really brought to light for me was that if you have a particular inequality, so for example, I'm a female, and in some ways that could be disadvantageous to me. I'm from an ethnic minority background, and in some situations, in professional situations, I'm viewed as quite young. And so when you have one on top of the other, it's just the fight becomes so much harder. And I think that trying to explain that and get that across to counterparts, to your allies, to members, to people that you work with, members of your professional working group, I think those are the kind of things that were brought to light through the campaign that I didn't anticipate, which I think is really, really positive.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that issue around intersectionality particularly is really important, isn't it? Because I think people forget that each of those factors taken individually can cause huge problems. But as you said, they compound each other as well. So thank you for raising that. In terms of looking to the future and plans moving forward, how do you sustain the impact of the campaign? What are your plans?
So because it was a campaign that involved so many London institutions, but also we reached far and wide. So we involved academics from all around the UK. I think we were really fortunate enough to tap into some networks. So every university has a research and development department, or a couple of really key members of staff. And so we were able to present at the Research and Development Conference. And so in that sense, you could just see the information being cascaded in, this is how these issues affect our staff and our students. We are the people that need to do something about it. And we've already had evidence of impact at the different institutions we've engaged with, which is really positive. At the very least, it started some very uncomfortable conversations. But I mean, there's a lot of future work going on that are kind of spin-offs of this work. And so we're hoping just to engage at so many levels. And we created a video toolkit. I think that's also worth mentioning. So for any early career researcher who feels really lonely and isolated in some of the issues that they're going through, we thought it would be a good idea to kind of take clips of the interviews with senior academics where they specifically talk about their issues. And you mentioned stories and really sad stories earlier. So they're framing their advice in relation to their issue, which I think if I had been earlier in my career stage and I'd seen a senior academic openly talk about their vulnerability and issues that they'd faced, I really think it'd make a difference to me. And I know that those videos, it's a free resource. They're being kind of really widely shared around the UK. So I see that as a way to kind of continue it on into the future.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think having that, we call it a digital legacy, I guess, is really important. It's something that can last, that can be shared and taken forward. So thank you. And your work's obviously had impact. I've seen and read about your work in lots of different places, and I know UCL are really proud of it. So congratulations and
thank you so much.
Tina, if I could ask you some similar questions. So can you take us back to the beginning and explain how you even got involved in the project?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There seem to be a lot of parallels with what Sarah was talking about, but on a maybe slightly smaller scale within the medical school. I suppose the way it started originally was a group of students who mainly who had an interest in social sciences, so in anthropology, philosophy, history of medicine. And we wanted to do something to kind of think more critically about medicine. We don't want to just learn facts and apply them in one situation. We thought there was something missing. And originally it was going to be just a simple group like that. And we realized that actually it's not enough. You need to be more political, that medicine is not just neutral. It has a very active part in society and contains a lot of society and social problems within medicine too. And so what was going to be a medical humanities group turned into decolonizing the medical curriculum, which thought to look at applying principles from social science to such as decolonizing, so taking into account historical legacies that exist today within medicine that are often black box. We don't question these sorts of problems, and interrogate them, break them down, and show people. Because I think a lot of people who aren't already exposed to this, they don't know. So they are part of propagating the problem. But that being said, it wasn't me who started this initiative. I really have to say, the main person behind it, Sarah Wong, and who worked with Hope Chow, they started they kicked the whole thing off. And then it was groups of us from different year groups. Should just say that it's definitely not just me. There's a whole network of people there. And it was during COVID. So as you said, a lot of stuff was online, which actually opened up a lot of possibilities. So we got connected with people who were doing similar projects at other universities and helped build a network that way. We did reading groups on discussing just like social problems and social theories, like why do we prescribe something like a medicine rather than looking at what's causing it, a social problem that's causing it, which should be more simple to target than just prescribing medication instead. But then what this led to was a round table where we got representatives from different universities in an online group. I think we had about 9 or 10 different universities, and it was really good. We learned loads from a lot of London medical schools are really pushing this kind of thing, and it sort of created links between people who felt more isolated at universities, particularly in areas where maybe outside of London, where these problems are often not so talked about, or in very, very kind of like white areas where it's just not even like criticized at some medical schools. So that was good for making those kind of connections. Then we got some funding to look at a very small part of our curriculum, which is under the kind of ethics and law part, which is often seen as the softer part of the curriculum. But we did get a lot of support from medical school, which was good. And then they allowed us to make some changes and start actually writing bits of our own curriculum. So they started small with a session on what was originally to be cultural competency. But we thought this wasn't actually a great term. Like, how can you be competent in someone else's culture? So we ended up changing it to a kind of cultural safety type lecture based on a project that had come out of a New Zealand medical school, which had actually worked with communities to come up with this theory. So it demonstrates how if you can collaborate with the people you're supposed to be helping, something really beneficial can come of it. That eventually led us to get more funding for another project where we're running a series called Critical Medicine, where we get speakers from lots of, there's a lot of interdisciplinarity. So not just medics speaking, but which actually helps because it shows that it's not just in the province isolated to medicine. And it encourages medical students to become a lot more critical of the information that they're taking in. So there was one on racism in the clinic, just trying to make these more complex social theories more accessible and more kind of practical. So how can we practically apply it if you face something like racism in the clinic? Sorry, I feel like I rounded a little bit. But that's where we are at the moment. We're about halfway through that project series.
Great. Well, that gives us a great overview of the work that you've done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you've made some really interesting points around medical students being given lots of information to just learn and memorise and apply in their exams. And we often talk about medical students being spoon-fed. I know that's a term I've used. And that's a reflection of the quantity of information that we have to take on as medics, and unavoidable in some ways. But I know in my teaching, I'm lucky I get to teach on my research a lot, so I can encourage students to be more critical. But I think the work that you've done is so important and so ambitious as well. So I just wanted to ask you about that in terms of the challenges that you've faced in the work that you've done. You mentioned the medical school have been really supportive, and I know Faye Gishard in particular has been really supportive, and she put me in touch with you guys. But were there any challenges, or was there any resistance that you came across from the medical school or from partners that you worked with?
I mean, with the curriculum, there's a lot of information that they have to cram into a very small amount of time. So a big challenge is getting space within the curriculum. And some members of staff were really helpful. I think the biggest one is people not seeing this as a problem, or thinking that what's being done is already enough. So there are some existing lectures on, say, structural inequalities or intersectionality, but is a one-off lecture or a couple of lectures, is that enough to sort of target people who maybe don't already agree with it, or don't know about this or don't agree with it? Versus one problem that we've actually faced is that the people we attract already agree with us, so there isn't that much kind of pushback. So when you come across someone who does disagree with you, it can be quite affronting because you're not used to having to defend these kind of things. And what ideally we want to do is to come up with a toolkit so that all the lecturers who teach not just the more social science part of the curriculum, but also the core parts, so about particularly genetics, particularly about diseases of lifestyle, infectious diseases, so that they can actually look at their own slides more critically and see if they're making or falling into any of these traps themselves. But another problem was knowing what to target. There are lots of groups in existence. So there's the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and there are subcommittees who are doing really incredible work as well, in a lot more kind of immediate problems, whereas the curriculum is a sort of chronic, ongoing problem. And so we're kind of collaborating with them, making sure that we're not repeating ourselves, and learning from each other. But yeah, it's knowing what to target, because there's problems in health research and it trickles all the way down, because we act on the research, and that becomes evidence-based. The more evidence there is, the more secure you feel in your knowledge. And again, if there's problems from the researchers conducting the research, there's going to be problems all the way through. And for me, this makes like quite a lot of sense, and why we should highlight it and talk about it and have discussions like this. But a lot of people who think that science is unbiased and pure and therefore we can trust it wholeheartedly don't see this as a problem. So yeah, it's convincing people, kind of harder to reach groups and not kind of preaching to the choir, as one part. And another problem, as you mentioned, a lot of the people who are involved in this are people who face discrimination within education, and within the workplace. And this leads to a sort of additional burden. So you called it an inequalities tax. And this is something that was widely debated amongst like the students. Should we be doing this stuff for free? Should we be being paid for it? And what came out was that a lot of people who are used to come in to do testimonials on racism they face or discrimination they face, it's very traumatic for them to do that, and then for it not to be kind of given the respect that it needs, or payment, because it takes a lot of time as well as emotional energy to go through that. So we thought that actually we should really set a precedent that if we're going to be doing this kind of work, we should be asked to be paid for it. It is, a lot of it has come through Changemakers funding, and a bit from the EDI, the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Committee funding. But yeah, we thought that was something that needed to be done.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and that's come up in discussions that we've had about how we encourage people who are underrepresented to get involved in research. And part of that is valuing people appropriately, and that might not just be in a monetary sense, it might be in terms of exchanging knowledge and providing training, things like that. So I think that's a really, really important point. Again, in terms of moving forward, I'm really keen that we discuss the sustainability of our work and how we can have long-lasting impact. Where do you see this project going? Is it something that's at risk of dying out as you guys move on and graduate? I know some of you already have, and are junior doctors, and you will be shortly too. So how do you make sure the work keeps going?
Well, yeah, that's definitely been one of the problems that we've had on our minds. So 2 people from the original group are already junior doctors, one in South London and one up in Manchester. If I pass my exams next month, that will be me too. But we'll have to see about that. And we've got, luckily, we've got a lot of people coming through. So we've had some kind of first years and second years and third years who've actually been incredible. And I just can't get over how some of these young students already know so much of the stuff that I didn't know when I was their age. And I've got a lot of hope for them, and I really want to be connected with this group going on, and throughout my career. I think I've learned a lot from the people that I've been around. I think moving forward, one group of people that we haven't engaged with are so we've done like students, lecturers, doctors, but we have projects like this are actually just incredible for actually knowing the people that this is going to be affecting. So patients and communities, who are the most important part, and that's what medicine should center around. And we haven't been doing enough of that. And coming to a project like this is wonderful. So thank you, both of you, and all of you for doing that. Creating this. I think it's all about people. It's all about people understanding, knowing, and valuing this as important to make as much to kind of push the change forward. I think there's a danger of becoming a bit checkboxy. Oh, we've done this and this, and so far, and that way we've satisfied it. And it's very difficult to measure the impact of education. So you can measure what's in the curriculum, but how does it affect people and how they practice medicine is really, really difficult. And so having networks, having continuity, like throughout training, and sharing stories from people at different stages in their training is really helpful. And I'm really fascinated by the video library that you've come up with, because that seems to be a really good way of sharing people's stories.
Yeah, I agree. And the other point that you made about the younger students seeming to have so much knowledge about this topic, it's a question for both of you really. Does it feel like there is a generational shift and that things are starting to change? Because that's one thing that people sometimes suggest is, well, things will get better, we can leave it till the next generation. And more senior academics have even said to me that, you're the next generation, the work's up to you now. I don't feel like that's a burden that I want to place on the next generation. I feel like it's our responsibility to do everything that we can to make it easier for them. And I'm really keen to do that for the next generation of students and health researchers. So how do you guys feel about that? Do you think things will change naturally, or do you think that we need to push that change? Sarah?
I don't think it will happen naturally. Sorry to be cynical, but I don't think, I think things are happening, and that's great. And I think that George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, so many things that have come about in the last 2 years have accelerated things that maybe wouldn't have happened in this decade. And I'm really, really pleased for that. But I think that in academia, which I can speak to, the culture is so hierarchical. So your next job, or the extension of your contract, or the conversion of your master's to a PhD, or your PhD to a postdoc, or your postdoc to the next position, is so contingent on the senior academics in your department, and your ability to perform. And your ability to perform may be hampered by one or many of the inequalities that you face. And I feel like, as you rightly said, Shobha, is our responsibility, if you're going through the system, to make it better for those who sort of come behind you. You have to do something, because at that career stage, I don't think, even if everybody is equipped with the knowledge, I still think that there is a fear of speaking out. And I don't know how and when that will change, unless those more mid-career or senior make that culture. So then when people are coming through, they feel far more open in sharing their inequalities. And I think, we often talk about the negatives of COVID because there have been far too many. But something that for me has been quite positive is a lot of your Zoom calls or such happen in your personal space, in your family home, your personal home, your room. And that has broken a particular barrier for some, where maybe family life is discussed, or other things. And I think that we should all be viewed as humans, and not just researchers or doctors, or defined by our job, because we are, we are kind of, lots of different things. And I think that once that's appreciated, that's when things will start to get better.
I agree. And you mentioned culture, and it's about cultural changes, isn't it? And within medicine and within academia, that's a very difficult thing to do. I think all the changes that we can make are really important. Tina, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I completely agree that it's everyone's responsibility. It doesn't matter if you're a top professor and you've got all your PhD and postdoc sorted, or you're a student. Like there's so much information out there, and it's very accessible. So, and I can't help thinking that if you are reading like the right resources, you will come to this conclusion that there are systemic problems here that need to be addressed. In terms of expectation on students to change, I think that's a kind of always an assumption that the next generation will fix it. The next generation will fix it. I know from experience that when we were given a 1 hour slot with pretty much free reign to create a lecture content for the first years, it was actually really daunting to say, we finally got what we wanted, and to put together, how are we going to have a 1 hour lecture? The topic was race and health. I mean, where do we even start with that? And do we start, because if you do too much theory, do you exclude a lot of the group? Or if it's not theoretical enough, people don't class it not as evidence-based. So it was really challenging. It was good for us to come up with and give a lecture on this. But it also made me realize that this is it is difficult to educate this if you're to teach people this. But what you need, it needs to be done, and we need to have collaboration with the different groups, with the different generations, so that you can actually speak with them. Because I think sometimes the newer generations, they feel like they're not being spoken to in the way that they want to be. So involving them again, like in the writing of the curriculum, to make sure it is accessible information and relevant to them is really important. But again, it's everyone's job to do.
Thank you. I think there's some really positive messages there, and messages of hope and optimism. So I think that's a great thing to leave it. So thank you very much. So glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess I wanted to talk to you more about the photography and photography as a medium for doing this kind of work. Because I know there's a lot of interest, particularly from the public engagement team, on creative methods and art and photography coming together with research to have impact and to show impact within communities. So I guess I wanted to talk to you more about your kind of background as a photographer. So you've done a lot of work in the past on social projects. So Robin Hood Gardens, for example, is one that you've worked on. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, with Robin Hood Gardens, I mean, it's a really interesting project because it involves lots of different factors. But reason why I kind of thought about doing a set of portraits about the residents of Robin Hood Gardens was that primarily, for those of you who may know Robin Hood Gardens, it's quite a famous architectural piece by Peter and Alison Smithson. So it's really well known, in terms of like brutalist architecture. So when I kept on coming across articles in the press about, the debate was really about, oh, it's an architectural masterpiece, we should keep it on the one side. And on the other side, it's an architectural monstrosity and it's a dump, we should get rid of it and build something new. That's amazing. So there was this constant debate about the architecture, but for me, it was, the fundamental thing that was missing really was the people who were living in that space and their voices being missing. So for me, it was really important to try and kind of redress that and actually talk to residents, not in a kind of tokenistic way. Oh, we're going to talk about the architecture. Let's talk to one resident who's going to say, oh, I don't like living here and I want, a brand spanking new flat. I mean, obviously the housing estate has issues. A lot of it's really to do about kind of ongoing maintenance. There's huge questions about social housing, especially in a borough like Tower Hamlets. But again, the key thing that was missing for me was the residents' voices and them being not represented in the whole debate. So that's really why I did that project. I did it with a friend and colleague of mine, Nick Soborn, who's a sociology lecturer at Manchester University. And again, like you, Shoba, he was really quite kind in getting a bit of funding for us, like a research grant. So we used that money to spend a bit of time over about 3 years, I think it was. We'd go out on a Saturday, just knock on doors really, and just talk to people. Some people wanted to talk to us, and other people were quite comfortable with us going in and photographing them. Some people just wanted to give us words. So it's a real kind of, when people invite you into their homes and you're witnessing a part of their life and they're telling you about their circumstances and their stories and how they happen to be there. It's an honor, it's a privilege that people let you into their lives. And particularly then, when you're photographing them, you have a responsibility to kind of portray them in the light that they want to be portrayed, keeping it real, keeping it realistic and really representing them as they see themselves. So it's a duty as well as that honor. And it's what I find with photography, and particularly with this project, it has to be a collaborative effort with the portraits. And then in terms of the workshops, I guess, it's a lot of communicating, and I've said this to all our participants, photography is such a subjective thing. There's no right way, there's no wrong way. It's how you see things. It's about how you want to represent what you're seeing. And that word representation is so crucial, I think, particularly, in the current climate. Sarah and Tina have talked about kind of, decolonizing medicine. There's a whole movement about decolonizing history. Visual representation, I think, contributes huge amount to that. And I think it's really important that, people like myself, people like yourself, people like Lloyd, people like Kim, Mahbooba, that these faces are seen, not just spoken to in terms of the health research side of things. So I think in terms of our project, it's a real complementary thing that on the one hand, yes, we've got important issues to talk about, but actually, we can run this photography side of it as a complementary parallel process that comes together into something like this, where it sparks debate, where it sparks conversations, and that we can talk about these things, because it's through that talking that we get to know each other, and through knowing each other, hopefully we'll kind of progress the issues that are really quite pertinent in our times.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you put that really well. And a lot of the stuff that you've talked about with Robin Hood and other projects that you've done, I think translates into the work that we've done as well, isn't it, in terms of representing people's voices. So was that what drew you to working with UCL and working with researchers? What was it that you were hoping to be able to achieve?
Well, selfishly, I'm still a photographer and I want to photograph. So, any opportunity to be, given that opportunity is very, very welcome. But on top of that, I saw it as a challenge. Here you are, Shoba, a GP, a doctor doing health research at UCL whilst running your practice. That to me was like, oh my God, what is this woman on? How many hours, do you work? How do you combine it? How do you balance it? So for me, it felt like, if you can do all of that, maybe I have to step up and kind of address the challenge in terms of how we combine photography with the work that you're doing. So really, when we talked about, how do we make people like Lloyd, people like Emdad, participate, and not just about me photographing them. How do we get them much more involved? And the photography was great. Everyone has a smartphone. Everyone takes photographs now. But it's about maybe getting people to think about actually, I'm talking to Shoba on my health issues. There's a global pandemic on, I know a few of our participants have been affected by COVID, certainly in the early days. So it's about kind of really thinking that maybe photography can represent what I've gone through and my journey, my health journey, be it COVID or be it a bike accident, whichever way, there's a process, that I've gone through. So we really looked at combining the two and coming up with thoughtful portraits, again, done in a collaborative way. So Lloyd is very much interested in local history. So we explored his local area, so Brunel's shipyard, correct me if I'm wrong, Lloyd, we thought that would be a real kind of place for him to be photographed. We talked about many, many issues with all the participants, be it at home or be it outdoors, be it about caring. So yeah, lots of issues that we talked about, that I learnt about. And actually I learnt more as well about photography. I've been a practicing photographer for about 18 years. Even so, surprising stuff came back, stuff that I hadn't thought about, stuff that you hadn't thought about. So they're really, really nice surprises, nice nuggets, and as you can see from our kind of rolling slideshow, it's also a sign of the times that we're in. It's a kind of documentary process. It's a holding people to account process. It's saying we are here, we are also affected. And the stats that you've talked about in your introduction about BME deaths, BME people being affected by COVID, and it's not just COVID, it's diabetes, there's lots of other issues, and it's really important for us to say, look, we are here, we have been here, maybe we're not with as much visibility as we deserve, as we have a right to, but we are here, we are where we are, this is the time now, and it's really important to say, see us.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really important thing to say. And the photographs that the participants themselves took and contributed to the project, which you can see above me on the slideshow, which are amazing. I think that was your idea. I don't think I would ever have thought to come up with that, actually, but it worked really well. And it worked, and we've talked about this morning, it worked really well in the workshops alongside the discussions that I was kind of generating, because I had lots of questions for everyone that I wanted to explore. How did that feel for you? Is that something you've done before, and do you think it went well? What's the learning on that, do you think?
It's normally, I've done workshops with young people before, looking at kind of issues that affect young people. So this was different in terms of, the health aspect of it. And I just felt like maybe, again, the participants can correct me if I'm wrong. It felt like a nice distraction in a way from talking about, because we covered very kind of deep and heavy
Serious
issues,
stuff, yeah.
a lot of stuff around mental health.
Yeah.
So, we just use the photography as a way to express, how we were feeling, mental health issues. And again, that's helped inform me really about, how I might continue with some of the other projects that I'm involved with. So it's always a learning process really. And it's we never stop learning.
Yeah, it definitely has for me as well. And now we've got these wonderful pictures, which we're planning to share digitally and in person. So you've got us a spot at the Brady Art Gallery, which is wonderful. I'm really excited about that. So yeah, how do you think we can use the images to kind of raise awareness of the issues and continue the discussions around this issue?
Look, it'd be remiss of us not to kind of mention social media. Over COVID, as we've seen over the last 18 months, even in terms of our project, how we've had to kind of conduct it. Initially, we thought we'd have kind of face-to-face meeting workshops, but actually we've had to take all that onto Zoom. Now, I wouldn't say it's better or I wouldn't say it's worse. I'd say it's different, right? It's different. And even with some of the pictures, Kim's set of pictures, she's like here now, exactly. You're going to see, it's taken on a mobile phone. Now you can see the call sign. You can see where she's kind of tried to take the photo, but she's obscured herself. This is really the sign of the times, right? This is how we have to deal with stuff now. Now we can have exhibitions and exhibitions are very temporary, but actually the online space is maybe affords us possibly a bit more of a permanency. And we have to think about how we digitally increase the longevity of projects like this so that they can live beyond, the limited funding that we have, the limited space that we have here today. I know we're going to be at the Brady for almost a month, so that's going to be nice. They have a good range of footfall, people coming into the cafe, people coming in for other activities, so they'll see this project up on the walls. But really, the digital space and social media, we really have to explore. And in some respects, we talk about representation, but maybe social media is the new thing that's going to help level it up for, underrepresented groups that go in the digital space, put it out to your networks, and you'll have much more kind of, more eyeballs, if you like, being able to see your stuff, whether it's kind of you promoting photography, whether it's you doing a food business, whether it's you talking about mental health issues, diabetes, whatever else, there's networks, there's communities, and I think we have to be a bit more proactive in terms of finding that space and going into that space and not being fearful, really. I know I'm a bit of a tech Luddite. I still work with kind of old film camera. I work with digital, obviously. So, we have to not be fearful of new spaces and really kind of be brave and go into that space and see what it can do for us.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, again, it's about accessibility. And if we know not everyone has access to social media, but a lot of people do. And therefore it does open up the opportunities for lots of people to get involved in the discussion. And that's what we're hoping that they'll do with this project.
Yeah.
Again, I think that's a great place to leave it. So thank you so much, Troy.
Thank you.
So, Lloyd, Chandrika, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
And thank you for all your involvement with the project. You guys have been amazing and really added to it so much. I wanted to talk a bit more about the issues that we discussed when we talked one-to-one, about some of the health experiences and challenges that you guys have both faced. I know you've both had huge challenges over the last few years and even previously. So Lloyd, starting with you, we talked a lot about mental health.
We did.
Particularly affecting young Black men.
Yes.
And I know you've had difficult experiences, both yourself and with friends.
Yes.
And losing friends to problems with mental health.
Yeah.
And that's really highlighted a lot of issues that I don't think I was aware of before and that I don't think is represented well in health research either. So I just wanted to talk to you a bit more about that and learn a bit more about what you think we can do to address this problem. So how can we raise awareness of this issue and how can research help with that?
I just thought, first I want to say thanks. It's been an amazing project. It's been really a really cool project to be part of. It was a good place to talk. I feel that I've got new friends now that I didn't have before. I knew something before, of course. Lovely couple there. It was just I kind of miss it now, which is a bit strange. I didn't think I'd miss it as much as I do, but I do. So I keep going back to the windows. I didn't put any pictures up, but I haven't. So, but yeah, my kind of coming into it, like obviously I'd lost a friend to mental health. And then I realised there wasn't a lot of places for me to go to talk about it and to get help within my community. So that's the whole idea where the plays come up. So I'm writing a play called Sick Cell. It's about mental health. It's about 6 individuals that travel, because I used to work in secure custodial services a very long time ago. And I realised then there was a lot of Black and Asian men that were going to prison all the time for no real apparent reason. And a lot of them were suffering with mental health that didn't know they had it. And my friend, a good friend of mine, he passed away about 5-6 years ago now, but he was a good friend of mine at school. And I just bumped into him and it just developed from there. There was lots of things that he was considered not normal. So I'd have a conversation with him and, there was occasions where we sat and watched a film called Babylon, which is a kind of cool film. And we got to the end of the film after watching it twice. And he said, I just like the music. I was like, you could have bought the soundtrack to the film. We could just play that all night. And then I began to realise there was something wrong with him. There was nowhere for me to go to ask for help, or there was nowhere for me to go to say, I think my friend has issues. What can we do to help him? And never mind me and him talking as Black men about mental health issues. And he kind of, at the beginning, he was really reluctant and refused. And then near the end of his passing, he started to kind of let me in, but there was no real help for him. And, he didn't want to talk about it. His family never really spoke about it. I had a friend before him who also had mental health issues, but he's still here, but he's on medication. And he was misdiagnosed at the beginning as having schizophrenia, and it wasn't. It was anxiety and depression, I think, because he lost his dad and PTSD. I then fell into PTSD after obviously my friend, because I discovered his body in his flat. And it was a mad experience to not understand what mentally is going on, but knowing there's something. So I got to be part of a group. I was talking about suicide, but that I got the last 2 weeks of that group because they disbanded. I got to see a counsellor, and I think the counsellor was the best part. And I think that within the Black community, if you talk about seeing a counsellor, you're kind of looked at as mad or crazy. And I don't think that's the case. I think it's the best thing I've done in the whole time I've been alive, to be able to sit in a room with someone else and tell them about what I'm going through, the experience I had. And it was good to then be able to leave it in that room. There was no rumination for me. And I began to start to, just get on with it. And that was where, like I said, I think that the reason that I'm writing the play is because I feel there's no outlet. I want to spark conversation. I think that's what you're doing, which is so great. And then to hear the two ladies there, it was really inspiring to know that there's a massive picture. It's not just we're part of a bigger picture.
Absolutely.
And to be involved in it was a pleasure and honor, and I'd like to keep it going. So that's why I was thinking of the whole pod. Like today, I've been sitting there going, okay, so how do we put this together? How are we doing? We could have a podcast, and there could be a doctor called Shoba, and then there could be random public people that ask you questions, and you could answer the facts. And so my mind's been spinning, but it's been a truly great experience, and it's given me confidence as well to talk about mental health more and get in contact with research and stuff. So it's been good.
And those are really difficult experiences that you've been through. So thank you so much for your honesty and your openness.
I was with friends, so it's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. But you talked about counselling, and I'm so glad that was a positive experience for you, and it is for a lot of people. Yeah. But you also mentioned that there's a sort of stigma around that, which I think probably lots of us can relate to. It happens within lots of communities. It can happen within the Asian community as well. And even talking about mental health can be very stigmatized. I think that's starting to change, and I'm starting to see changes as a GP with people coming forward more. But if we can't even talk about mental health within our communities, how are we going to increase representation by people like you in mental health research so that we can change things and improve the treatment and improve the access to mental health support? How do you think we can go about doing that?
Well, the suggestion that plenty of discussions we've had in this group, because we had loads of discussions, was that you kind of have an advocate. So it'd be kind of like a person like me, who's from the community, who's either been nominated or guest, or he spoke to various people within the community that would be able to articulate itself and be in that position to ask the questions that would affect my community, and then maybe be able to go back to my community or put a video up on social media that says, okay, this is your little representative, and he's gone to ask the questions that maybe you might feel silly to ask, you might feel stupid to ask, but like you have said to me on occasions, there's no silly questions. You've got to ask what you feel, and I think that's maybe the problem. Because with my friend, he never really wanted to admit that he had mental health issues, and only until he nearly got kicked out of his flat, and we sat with a judge and a doctor in the town hall, Mulberry Town Hall, that then maybe he started to realise, but the doctor agreed with me and so did the judge. And that was the only point where I'd gone, okay, all the fears I had were true, because there was a doctor sitting across the table from me and a judge and saying, we do think we have serious concerns for your friend. Yeah. And now it's all on record. But after that, it kind of, nothing happened. So unless he became, a fear to public or a risk to himself, it doesn't happen. So I phoned doctors and said, look, I can tell you all the signs. I'm like, we can't help you. You're not a family friend. He hasn't harmed himself or harmed anyone in public. And I'm like, isn't prevention better than cure? So I hope there was a way that we could, I don't know, intervene if you're a best friend and you can prove, because I could prove loads of things, what school we went to, lots of key details. I wasn't just a random person trying to say my friend's going crazy, because that's the other way I thought of it. Say I don't like someone, I could phone up the GP and say, I think they're a bit unstable, and then a whole investigation may happen. But I don't know, a way of having that group or having that point, or maybe discussion groups could kind of like, what we did was kind of cool, and a way of people expressing themselves maybe visually through pictures, because not everyone can articulate themselves and talk. So
and you mentioned advocates, and that's something that we talked about as a group, and it's also come out of a lot of the research that's being done on the moment on COVID and the vaccine particularly, because of mistrust that people sometimes have in government and in health professionals. And this idea of having a trusted friend or a trusted community member is really coming to the forefront as a way of tackling that. So I think that's one really positive approach that needs to be explored more. And maybe that's the next step for research, is evaluating that as an approach. That's something I'm really interested in. So thank you for bringing that up. And that's something I'm really interested to take forward. Chandrika, I wanted to move on to you and your really honest conversations and photographs that you've shared with us about your experience of being a carer to your parents, which is a huge responsibility. And often we don't talk about carers and the challenges that you experience, particularly when interacting with healthcare. You've described some of those challenges to me. And you talk about, as a carer and as an elderly person, not feeling like you have that voice or feeling invisible. How do we therefore represent you guys and encourage you guys to come forward and give you a seat at the table and make sure that we can hear what you need to tell us about your experiences?
I think people fall into caring. I don't think it's necessarily what you would call an open choice. It's usually a closed choice. And they're usually choices that I had to make a choice within 5 to 10 minutes, really, about the sort of long-term care for my mum. And then that sort of opened up into both of my parents. And I think what people don't realise is that carers have a background themselves. They're living their lives. They might be parents themselves. They might have their own families. They've got careers. They're doing things with their lives. And they have skill sets that I think people can use. And I think in health in particular, I think there's a sort of a disjoint between people that work in academia and health and how they see patients and carers as a sort of separate entity, and the two will never meet. And so this particular project, we kind of did all feel as though we were one group. We didn't have little sort of cliques, did we? No. And I think it's about that, really. It's about engaging with people. But the reason that I engaged with everybody was because you all told us your personal stories. Yeah. And that's the way you get to it, I think. We're all people at the end of the day. And that's how you're going to get to it. If you get to the human aspect, that's how you're going to connect. But if you talk about your role or the research that you've done or the accolades that you have, then you're going to create barriers. And that creates a barrier between somebody that's a patient and somebody that's a carer, because we feel quite invisible and we also feel that we can't express ourselves. So if you're coming at us in a sense that you're more knowledgeable, we're going to sort of retreat back a little bit because we're not so comfortable with that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that was my aim with this project, was to use, so this gets banded about a lot, but the term co-production or co-development is a really hot topic. It's very trendy in health research at the moment. And I think it can sometimes be done well, but it can be done badly as well. And I've tried really hard to try and take that approach to this project. So it's great to hear that that's what it felt like for you guys as well. And I've learned so much about doing that kind of work now from working with you guys. I'm really glad. And thankfully, it's something that's really supported here at UCL. So we have the co-production collective, and Nick Hutchinson from the Co-Pro collective it actually advised me on how to go about approaching this project. So thank you, Nick. And I know you guys have been involved with work that they've done as well. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
So they're trying to create a website and is it a portal?
Community website.
That everybody can interact in and with. Yeah. And what I like about that co-production collective is that they realise that not everybody is comfortable with social media, with online, tech, and speaking and interacting with other people. There might be introverts, there might be extroverts. So they consider everybody. Yeah. And that's quite unusual because normally you tend to get people that pick on people that are kind of quite mouthy, like me. But then you'll forget the people that aren't really
confident,
chatty. Yeah.
And I think the thing that I realised with the production or the way they got together, the way they've done it is, again, they've got people from different walks of life.
Yeah.
But they're letting us talk. And I think what I've realised about this project and what I think you're getting at going forward is you need the people that you're affecting to be able to speak or have a voice.
Yeah, definitely.
So that whole voice for the voiceless, I think, was amazing. Yeah. And I thought, okay, it makes sense because without this project, we'd be voiceless.
Yeah.
But now we have a voice. And if then that continues, then it sends a little benchmark to people to go, okay, there is a place, there is an outlet. And the more eyes you get on that, I think the bigger it be. So the back to the whole production of the website is really smart, because we came up with loads of suggestions that they technically didn't really think about, obviously, because they're not coming from our background. So that's been really smart. So we came up with some really good ideas. I'm looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to how it comes about, because it's really interesting.
I think you're right about giving a voice to the voiceless. And I think it's also about, so Chandrika, you mentioned when people approach you, assuming that they have more knowledge than you, I think it's also about power shifts as well. And that's something that, again, is coming out of the research that's happened since COVID around why inequalities have increased and why mistrust has increased, is because of this idea of one group of people being in power, and that puts off underrepresented communities. So I'm really interested in how we do that. And I've had a conversation this week with a local public health strategist who I said, with my work, what I'm trying to do is shift that power, so the people who are interviewing or the people who are developing the intervention, I'm sorry, this is very medical speak, but those are the people that are also affected by the problem. So it's community talking to communities. Do you think that's something that's a useful approach for the future?
Yeah, I think that thing that you said about that old saying, you don't know my life till you walked a mile in my shoes. So if you're talking to someone who hasn't experienced mental health, or is not a carer, they're going off all the research they've done, which says this, and this. But have you lived the life that she's living? Have you lived with someone who has mental health, or do you know anyone in your family who has it? And then it might make you look at it slightly different, because then you're not really looking at it through a doctor's eyes, or through clinical eyes, where there's more of a humane touch if you know someone who's been through it, or let them talk about experience, and then you might treat your patients a little bit better. So
I think there's also some. I do go on about elderly people and disabled people not having a voice, and there is something about that. I do think they are forgotten about, and because I am quite an outspoken advocate for my parents, people go straight to me. And I think, my mum and dad are actually they're kind of capable of, and they're very independent. And I think it is about, that sort of analogy for how health, people in health care, social care, and in the academic world who study health and public health sort of view patients. It is, and people that use those systems, it's as though we are very passive and we're not assertive. And I think we need to find a middle ground so that we're all collaborating together, so that actually we are doing good things for one another. So we're helping people train to become better health professionals, but you're also helping to treat us so that we recover. So it's a middle ground, really.
Yeah, I think it's that word collaboration, isn't it? That's really important. And I'm really glad that that's getting more attention and being used more in health research. So I guess, let's hope it continues and grows, and hopefully this project will kind of advocate for that as well. So thank you guys so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All the time and what you put into this project, and I love your photos.
Thank you so much to keep us in that
It's a
project.
privilege.
So we're really happy. It's like a family.
It is.
So
I think
really
we've been
enjoying
really
this
lucky,
project.
haven't we? That
I can say I see my family member for the first time face to face.
No, I know. It's just so nice to see you all in person. Because we've had loads of conversations over Zoom, haven't we? And so I wanted to talk more about that. So I've talked to you both about your experiences, and you've both had really interesting experiences, which resonate with me in terms of my experience as a GP and as a health researcher. Mehbooba, you talked about problems with chronic pain since you had a bike accident some years ago, and the challenges of dealing with that in terms of interacting with health professionals, receiving treatment that you felt was appropriate, having to self-manage your pain, and having to, continue going about your life whilst managing your pain. And that sounds really, really difficult. And I think sometimes health research and health professionals don't necessarily tackle that, and particularly in men and women, particularly from diverse backgrounds, we're sometimes not as good at talking to you about these issues and making fair assessments and giving the right treatments. So my question, I guess, for you is how do we go about tackling that? Is it about talking to more people like you and understanding your perspectives better? What would you say?
I feel like doctor or GP or anyone should be see their history before call any patient in there or read their history to talk to. Because if I say you something like, that's what happened, you don't know my history, then you're going to think, okay, medically term, these go this way. Okay, I have to send her there. But if you see I got chronic ongoing something issue with that and what's happening with my life and how I'm tackling that, is more easy for doctor to understand, okay, no, she already came before, 2 years before or 6 years before, is happening. Now she need some other treatment. So is happening to her own body. Might be lot of things you don't see on your face, what's going on inside you, like a mental health issue. It could be from your pain, it could be from your family, it could be anywhere. Because when I go for chronic, they sometimes think the family issue. So it's not family, it could be my pain making me mental health issue, because I can't sleep sometimes. Every day is different for me. Every morning is different for me. So it's really hard to tell GP what's going on. And every time when we see new GP, when they know you got a chronic, they just make something different. And ethnic background, that's make us, because when they know I'm Asian, our food habit is like different. But everyone not having the same food. They don't think about that one. They just judge with that. So they need to change. They need to change their how they can understand what the patient's saying. As like a family, like we did the whole thing. As like a family, we speak to each other. When we see each other, we know long time, but we see everyone on the Zoom. So that's like they have to understand. They have to listen. If you go for like a head pain or like ear pain, it could be something, or neck pain, it could be something related. They don't understand that one. They just judge, okay, go or take medication. Medication is good for pain, but I will say not always good for pain. It's make you like a different world, like a drug thing, what they give me. So sometimes I feel they need to understand what's going on, and they should be listen more to judge any people is older, younger, or even me. So they should be understand and listen instead of after 2 years later, I have to go for operation and see more frequently, like what's going on your body. Could be 1 week, could be 1 month, or could be 6 months. It doesn't bother.
I think that's a really important point about listening and not making assumptions and not judging. And I think one of the things that might happen in health, both health research and in healthcare, is that people from certain backgrounds and certain groups maybe get stereotyped, and people make assumptions about what the cause of their problem might be. And it's also really interesting that you touched on the links between pain and mental health as well, because that's quite a complex relationship, isn't it? As you said, it could be your pain making you feel low, or the other way around, vice versa. And often the two occur together. But it makes it really difficult for you if I, as a healthcare professional, make an assumption that it's one problem over the other. So, I mean, that is a topic I'm really interested in. And I think more research needs to be done on that. And especially our approach and the way that we assess people with those kinds of problems. So how do we do that kind of research? Is it about being more inclusive?
They should be see the history of the thing, what I said before as well. And they should be talk more, because when you got a chronic, it could be affect different way. Because chronic sometimes, if I say about me, sometimes for the pain, I can't sleep whole night. Even it's 4, 5 o'clock, time ticking, you see everyone's sleeping, but you can't sleep. So when any normal human body need 8 hours sleep, when you can sleep in a 8 hours time, when you just sleep 2, 3 hours or 4 hours, in the whole day, what's going to be happen? You got anything is coming mental issue, like you thinking something is coming something, you doing something. So they need to talk more and go the history and know and what they can do better to stop it, not just you got chronic. Because if you are a GP, so I'm going to say when you see chronic or when you know someone got a chronic, no, it's going to be happen. is there somewhere need to stop or something they can make feel better.
Yeah.
So is any, not only chronic pain or any pain, they need to check at least 6 months or something is gone further or what's going on the patient or on call even if they are not, we can't go GP or anything. On call, how is happening, what's going on further, what's happened. Because sometimes when they give appointment, they don't do further checkup.
Yeah.
And when something come up, we don't know what's happened to us. It's just like a history in our thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you mentioned sort of communication, consultation skills. I think maybe that's one of the issues here is around doing research to better understand good and bad practices or effective or ineffective consultation practices that we use. So maybe it's about analysing some of that data. That's part of the research I do is analysing recorded consultations. So maybe that has a role in this. So I think that's an interesting idea.
Sometimes, when even GP, if you go, they listen to you, you feel better. Like you feel it's not done, but you listen.
Yeah.
So someone listen to you, make feel more better, or they know your history was, okay, we do this one. Even not done, it's make you like you did something, or it's gone top of your head. It's not on your head anymore.
Yeah. Listening is medicine. Yeah. As I have heard people say before. Thank you, Mahabuba.
Can I add one point?
Yes, please do.
Nowadays, the GP have a 10-minute slot, or maybe you have a 10 symptoms, 10 pains, 10 other things. But they say, tell me only one. So this is the problem because maybe she had a chronic pain, connecting with each others. Tell me one. That means she have to say headache, migraine. Okay, do this. But that's related to other also back pain, hand pain, leg pain, but they're not listening. Yeah. So they need to need to see the patient, like who have a chronic pain or they are coming repeat patients. They need to go through the thing, how many problems you have, what is the problem, then they can go diagnostic, like this research, then come up with the updates. Yeah. Okay, we did blood test, this is the problem, and you have this problem, is coming up. So kind of holistic approach, if they take, they can save time, they can save government money. I can give you an example from myself, like around 2007 and 8, I rushed to GP for my heartburn. I said, I have a heartburn. I didn't go first instance. Few weeks I see why is the heartburn coming. I couldn't get. So I went to GP and GP said, oh, you are Asian people, you are eating too much oily food, frying food. You stop eating that, then you will be better. Okay. Then I tried to cut down everything. Again, after 2-3 weeks, I'm feeling heartburn. Again, I went there. They said, oh, I think you're still eating too much. So I stop eating this and take the Reni, take the antacid like this. Okay. After 2-3, I rushed to hospital because of I did vomit with blood. I did poo with blood. I rushed to emergency. I was there 2 nights, 3 days. Then I asked my doctor, what happened? Why I'm hospitalized? They say, you had a bacteria. It's called Hylopylobacteria. I said, how am I get this bacteria? They asked me, are you smoking? I said, no. Do you drink alcohol? I said, no. Then in your case, it's 1 in a million that the bacteria was there and they leak your abdominal. So they treated with the camera through my mouth and they treated. They said everything is fine now. But my question is, when I rush to the GP, if GP didn't stereotype me and they go for further diagnostic, they can find out the bacteria is there, that they can treat. But they want to save money, not to diagnostic. They maybe save 200 pounds on there. But at the end, when I rush to hospital, they spend government 2,000 pounds, for example. So they should take these symptoms or why the patient coming to the GP. They're not going for a fun. They're coming really, they have a problem. Without stereotyping where they come from, what's the symptom, go through diagnostic or investigation. Get the result, save government money, save people's life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that speaks to Mahabuba's point about not making assumptions as well, doesn't it? So again, consultation skills. And finally, I wanted to talk to you quickly about your experience of your diabetes and an approach that you've taken to that, which I think is really interesting, which is intermittent fasting. So I do a lot of research on diabetes and self-management and how we encourage people to change their lifestyle to improve their diabetes management, because we know that with poor blood sugar control, there's lots of risks of complications, including heart disease, vascular disease, etc. So it's a real kind of public health priority to encourage people to manage their own health. And a big part of that is about weight loss. And you've managed to do that through intermittent fasting. So I'm really interested in how you approached it and how you approached looking at the evidence for it and how you made those decisions.
Basically, I can say I didn't look for like fasting as a way of to control my diabetes, but because I just tell I'm a religious person, I believe in my creators.
Okay.
So what is in the books, I try to go through. And then suddenly I found out that our prophet fasts twice in a week. And that make him healthy and healthy lifestyles he can contain. Like, so I think why not start fasting and follow his path, and maybe it will benefit it to me. Then after a few months, when I went to the nurse for blood checkup for diabetic, they say you are in control. What you did? Did you walk? Did you run? Did you exercise? Did you go gym? I said, no, nothing. What you did? I said, I did fasting twice a week. And I go to my mosque 5 times a day. Just make me walk 50 minutes. And when I drop off and pick up my child from the school, there's another half an hour, 1.5 hours, and twice a week in fasting. That's it. Just is the amazing, because we never know the fasting help you to control diabetes. So I think how you doing, keep it up, and just make you like controlling.
Yeah.
So all the glucose, everything was under control.
Yeah.
And this is simple life. Like,
so it's worked really well for you, and there is really good evidence to show that it works really well in reducing people's weight, particularly in the short term. Long-term results are still kind of to be investigated. But how do you think we encourage or support people from similar backgrounds to yourself to give this kind of thing a try, to improve their diabetes control? How do we go about doing that?
I think for the diverse community in our local area, we can run some workshops or can talk with each other, just share just personal experience to them. And because every religion, they have a good things to say. If we follow the religion, we can be healthy. We can get rid of lots of diseases. That's some belief. If you follow your religion properly, you can't be sick, because they have all the steps how you can stay healthy, how you can be mediated like that. So all the things make you like a healthy lifestyle. No need to go for medicine. Yeah. So we need to just explain people, and to explain them, maybe someone have a language barrier, so we can maybe involve some community interpreters or bilingual people to explain them. And some people have a stigma also, like a mental health. So we need to tell them, come forward and raise your voice for this, and whatever you know, share with each other. Yeah. Then maybe you can learn from each others.
Yeah, and I think it relates to the stuff we were talking about earlier about advocacy and understanding people's individual motivations to want to do something. Because if you can speak to someone's motivation, whether it be religion or another cultural or a social issue, then they're far more likely to engage with it than if you come to it from a sort of broader perspective. So I think that's really interesting as well.
Can I add something like what is about fasting? If we are religious, we're going to do that one. But without religious, if we can say, okay, or we can run a project like this, if we do like what we do, like as a fasting, like midnight to until the, like evening, late evening, we do fasting. So if anyone can do it, like me, if I want to weight lose, so who want to weight lose, we're trying to run a project like this. Yeah. Is proved as well if we do fasting, and that is lose weight, not that way, like at least something proved. So we can run a project like this. Other people can take part, and we can see what's going on.
Yeah, and I'm really interested in that idea of peer-to-peer education, peer-to-peer support, because I think you're right. If people see someone else who looks like them or is from a similar background to them, having tried this and having found it useful, I think that's far more powerful than a health professional or a fitness trainer or whoever coming along and trying to get someone to do that. So I think that's a really useful point as well. Thank you both.
Thank you so
for
much.
The interesting discussion.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. That concludes the panel for today. We've had some really interesting discussions about the use of creative approaches to public engagement with research. We've talked about mental health and the stigma of mental health in particularly young Black men. We've talked about the burden on carers of elderly people, and we've talked about chronic pain and self-management and type 2 diabetes. So a whole broad range of issues there. And also talking to you all has given me some really great ideas for research moving forward in terms of peer-to-peer support and advocacy, and evaluating those things so we can understand how effective they are and how we can do these things better and how we can support people from diverse backgrounds in a more effective way. So thank you all for your contributions. And I can't wait to kind of move forward and work with you guys more on my research. So thank you.